My sister sent me a video by accident. She deleted it almost immediately, but I had already opened it. It was from a group chat I wasn't in. At first, it didn't seem like anything serious. Just a short clip, people talking, laughing. Then I heard my name, and the way they were saying it wasn't the way you talk about someone you respect. I stayed quiet. I didn't react, because I wanted to understand what I had just seen. So, I didn't confront her. I didn't mention it. I just started paying attention, because whatever that group chat was, I wasn't supposed to know it existed. My name is Aisha. I'm 27 now, and at the time this happened, I had been living on my own for a couple of years but still stayed very connected to my family. Not in a dependent way, just involved. We spoke often, visited regularly, shared updates about everything. At least, that's how it felt on the surface. My family has always had a certain structure. Not strict, just defined in a way that everyone understood without needing to say it out loud. My older sister, Sana, naturally took the lead in most things. Not because she forced it, just because people followed her. She spoke confidently, made decisions quickly, and my parents trusted that. If something needed to be handled, she was usually the one doing it. That created a dynamic where her voice carried more weight. Not unfairly, just consistently. I was different, not quiet, just more measured. I didn't rush to speak. I didn't push into conversations. I listened first, then spoke when I needed to. And that worked for me, because I never felt like I needed to compete for space. At least not at the time. There was a family group chat. The main one. The one everyone was in. Daily messages. Updates. Photos. Normal things. Birthdays. Plans. Small conversations throughout the day. And from my perspective, that was where everything happened. That was the center of communication. Nothing felt hidden. Nothing felt separate. Everything felt shared. That's what I believed. My relationship with Sana was steady. We weren't the kind of sisters who shared everything, but we stayed connected. We talked. We checked in. We showed up when it mattered. And that was enough. There wasn't distance, just space, which felt normal. But looking back, there were small moments, things that didn't stand out then, but stayed in the background, like how sometimes she would already know something about me before I had told her, not in a direct way, just in conversation, a comment, a reference, something that suggested she had heard it somewhere else. I would notice it, then move on, because it didn't feel important enough to question. There were also times when family conversations felt slightly ahead of me, like I was stepping into something that had already been discussed. Decisions that seemed already agreed on. Opinions that were already aligned. And I would catch up in real time, without knowing where it started. At the time, I explained it simply. They must have talked about it earlier. Maybe in person. Maybe on a call. It didn't feel unusual, because families do that. They talk in different spaces, different times. So, I didn't question it. Then there were smaller things. Jokes I didn't fully understand. References that didn't include context. Moments where everyone else seemed to be on the same page. And I was slightly behind. Not excluded. Just not fully included. And that's a difference that's easy to ignore. Because it doesn't feel intentional. It just feels like timing. Or miscommunication. So I let it pass. Every time. There were also moments with my sister specifically, where she would say something about me, not directly to me, but around me, in a tone that felt slightly different. Not negative, just shaped in a way I didn't recognize as mine. And I would notice it, then dismiss it, because it wasn't strong enough to hold on to. That's the pattern. When something isn't clear, you don't investigate it. You normalize it. You fit it into something that makes sense. That's what I did. I fit everything into the idea that this was just how our family worked. Different conversations happening at different times. Nothing hidden, just layered. And because I believed that, I never looked for anything outside of it. I stayed in that version of things. The one where everything I saw was everything that existed. The one where nothing was happening without me knowing. Because there was no reason to think otherwise. Everything still looked normal. We still met, still talked, still shared things. Nothing had changed on the surface. And when nothing changes on the surface, you don't assume something exists underneath it. That was the assumption, that what I was part of was the full picture, not just a version of it. And that belief stayed completely intact until that moment when my phone lit up and I saw a video from my sister that disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived, but not before I had already opened it. And in that moment, everything I thought I understood about how my family communicated shifted completely, because that video didn't feel like something I had missed. It felt like something I was never meant to see at all. I opened it without thinking, because it came from her, and there was no reason to hesitate. It was just a few seconds long. Nothing edited, nothing staged, just a clip. People sitting together, talking, laughing. The kind of video you send without thinking. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. It felt normal. Familiar voices. A setting that looked like home. Then I heard my name. Not loudly. Not directly addressed. Just mentioned. And something about the tone made me pause. Not what they said. The way they said it. It wasn't neutral. It wasn't the way you speak about someone casually. It had weight. That was the first shift. Small, but enough. I didn't replay it immediately. I just sat there for a second, trying to place what I had heard. Then I watched it again, this time more carefully, listening instead of just hearing. And the more I focused, the clearer it became. They were talking about me, not in a direct conversation, but in passing comments, small remarks, things that sounded like they had context. Context I didn't have. That's when I checked the message again, because something about it didn't feel right, and it was gone, deleted. That was the moment everything changed. Because people don't delete things that are normal. They delete things that weren't meant to be seen. I didn't react. I didn't message her. I didn't ask anything, because I knew what would happen. It would be explained away, turned into something smaller. Something I misunderstood. And I wasn't interested in that. I wanted to understand it clearly. So I stayed quiet. I let it sit. And instead of focusing on the video itself, I focused on what it meant. Because the video wasn't the point. The group chat was. A group chat I wasn't part of. That was the first thing that settled in. Not emotionally, just clearly. Because up until that moment, I believed everything important happened in the main chat, the one we all shared. Now I knew there was something else, something separate, and the fact that I wasn't in it meant it wasn't random. It was intentional. I thought about the voices in the video, tried to place them, not all of them, but some, and I recognized enough. Family, close enough to matter. That made it different. Because this wasn't just a side conversation. It was a space, a consistent one, where conversations happened without me. That's when I started thinking about the tone again. The way my name was said. Not hostile, not aggressive, just familiar in a way that suggested repetition. Like this wasn't the first time. That was the part that stayed with me. Not what was said, but how comfortable it sounded. I didn't confront her. I didn't mention the video, because I needed to see something first. Not what happened once, but what was happening consistently. So, I paid attention. The next time we spoke, I didn't bring it up. I stayed exactly the same. Same tone. Same responses. Because I needed her to stay the same too. That's how you see things clearly. Not by changing the situation, but by watching it as it is. And I noticed something immediately. She didn't mention the video. Not casually. Not as a mistake. Nothing. Like it never happened. And that told me everything. because if it had been nothing, she would have said something. A quick explanation. A correction. But she didn't, which meant she was choosing not to. That was the second shift. Then, I paid attention to timing. When she was active. When she wasn't. And I started noticing gaps. Not obvious ones. Just moments where she seemed engaged somewhere else. Responding later than usual. Skipping over things. And I didn't question it directly. I just noted it. Then I looked at the main family chat differently. Not for what was there, but for what wasn't. Conversations that felt incomplete. Topics that ended quickly, like they had already been discussed somewhere else. That's when it connected. Not fully, but enough. Because now I wasn't just thinking about a video. I was thinking about a separate space, where those conversations continued, without me. And once that thought settled in, I couldn't ignore it, because now the question wasn't just, what did I see? It was, how long has this been happening without me knowing? After that, I stopped thinking about the video as a one-time mistake, because it didn't feel like one. It felt like something I had briefly stepped into, by accident, and then been removed from just as quickly. So I started paying attention differently, not just to my sister, but to everything around me. The family chat, conversations, timing, the way people responded. And the more I paid attention, the more something became clear. There were gaps, not obvious ones, just spaces where things seemed to move forward without me. Conversations would start, then suddenly feel like they were already halfway done. Decisions would be mentioned, but not discussed. Like I was hearing the conclusion, not the process. That was the first pattern. I didn't react to it. I just observed. Because once you see something once, you start seeing it everywhere. Then I noticed something else. The way my sister would respond to things I hadn't said yet. Not exactly, just slightly ahead. Like she already had context. And that context wasn't coming from me. That meant it was coming from somewhere else. That was the second pattern. Then I started thinking about the video again. Not what was said, just the tone, the comfort in their voices, the way my name came up, like it wasn't new, like it was part of an ongoing conversation. And that's when it shifted, because now it wasn't about one moment. It was about repetition, something that had been happening more than once. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions, because I needed to see how consistent it was, not how it was explained. So I let things continue, exactly the same. I didn't change how I spoke, didn't change how I responded, because I needed everything to stay natural. That's when patterns show themselves clearly. A few days later, we were all in the main group chat, talking about something simple, plans for the weekend. Nothing important. And I noticed something. The conversation ended quickly. Too quickly. Like everyone already knew what the plan was. And I was just being informed. That was the moment it connected more clearly. Because it didn't feel like a discussion. It felt like an update. That meant the discussion had already happened somewhere else. Then it happened again. A different topic. Same pattern. Quick agreement. No back and forth. No real conversation. Just confirmation. That's when it became undeniable. Because once something repeats like that, it's not random. It's structured. I also started noticing something more subtle. The tone my sister used when talking to me, compared to how she sounded in that video. It was different. Not dramatically. Just slightly. More measured. More careful. And that told me something. Because people don't adjust their tone unless they're aware of how they're being perceived. That meant the version of conversations I was part of wasn't the same as the version happening somewhere else. That was the shift. Not emotional. Just clear. Because now I wasn't looking at a mistake. I was looking at two separate versions of communication. One I was included in, one I wasn't. And both were consistent. That's what made it different. If it had been occasional, it could have been explained. If it had been unclear, it could have been questioned. But this wasn't either of those. It was repeated, structured, and intentional. I went back to that moment in the video again. The way they said my name, the ease in it, and I realized something. That wasn't a new conversation. That was a continuation, which meant it had been happening long enough to feel normal to them. That was the part that stayed with me. Not what they said, just how familiar it sounded. Because familiarity doesn't happen once. It builds over time. I didn't need more after that. Not really. But I still waited. Because I wanted one thing. One clear moment. That confirmed everything without question. And as I sat there thinking about it, one realization stayed with me. If there is a space where people talk about you freely, without you knowing, then what you see is only one version of how they actually feel. Once I understood what I was looking at, I stopped treating it like something accidental. Because it wasn't. Not anymore. I wasn't trying to figure out if the group chat existed. I already knew it did. What I needed now was to understand how it worked, and how much of what I was seeing was only a controlled version of everything. So, I changed how I paid attention, not to what people said directly to me, but to what happened around that. The timing, the pauses, the moments where things felt slightly ahead of me. I didn't confront my sister. I didn't mention the video, because I needed her to stay exactly the same. That's when people don't adjust. That's when patterns stay visible. I started with something simple, the family chat. I watched how conversations moved, not what they were about, just how they flowed. And it became clear quickly. Topics didn't develop there. They ended there. Someone would bring something up, and within a few messages, it was already decided. No back and forth. No real discussion. Just agreement. And that only happens when the discussion already happened somewhere else. That was the first confirmation. But I didn't stop there. Because one moment doesn't prove a structure. Consistency does. So I tested it. Quietly. Without making it obvious. One evening, I brought up something small in the family chat. A plan for the weekend. Nothing complicated. Something that normally creates opinions. Suggestions, questions. I phrased it openly, left space for discussion. Then I waited. At first, nothing. No immediate responses, which was unusual, because normally someone would reply quickly. Then, after a short gap, the messages came in, not as questions, not as discussion, just aligned answers. Clear. Final. Like everyone already knew what they were agreeing to. That gap mattered. Because that's where the real conversation happened. Just not where I could see it. I didn't react. I didn't change anything. I just noted it. Then I did it again. A few days later. Different topic. Same structure. I brought something up. Left it open. And again. There was a pause. Then responses came in. Already aligned. Already decided. That was the second confirmation. Then I paid attention to my sister more closely. Not in an obvious way. Just observing. When she was active. When she wasn't. And I started noticing a rhythm. There were moments where she would go quiet. Disappear from the chat. Then come back. And immediately respond with clarity. Like she already knew what was happening. That was the third confirmation. Then I tested something more specific. I asked her a question directly. In the family chat. Something that required thought. Not something she could answer instantly. And instead of responding right away, she waited. There was a gap. Then she answered. Clear. Certain. Final. Like the answer had already been discussed somewhere else. That was the moment it became clearer. Because people don't pause on simple questions. Unless they're checking something first. I didn't call it out. I didn't react. I just kept watching. Then I started noticing something else. The tone. Not just in messages, but in how she spoke to me in person. Compared to what I heard in that video, there was a difference. Not dramatic, just controlled, careful, measured. But in the video, she wasn't. She was relaxed, unfiltered. And that difference mattered, because it meant there were two versions of communication. One where I was present, one where I wasn't. That was the fourth confirmation. Then I looked at how information reached me. Not when it started, but when it ended. I was always at the end of things. Plans were already decided. Opinions already aligned. Details already agreed on. I was included in the outcome, not the process. And once I saw that clearly, it stopped feeling like coincidence. It felt structured, like there was a space where everything happened first, and then a version of it was brought to me after. I tested it one more time. Something slightly bigger. A family plan that would normally need discussion. I brought it up, left it open, and again, the same pattern. Pause. Then alignment. No variation. No disagreement. Just confirmation. That was the moment it became complete. Not a suspicion. Not something I was still figuring out. Just fully understood. This wasn't just a separate group chat. It was a separate version of communication. A place where things were said more freely, more honestly, more directly. Just not with me. I didn't need to see another video. I didn't need more proof. Because everything around me was already confirming it. The timing, the tone, the structure, all of it pointed to the same thing. There was a version of my family that existed without me in it. And it wasn't occasional. It was consistent. That was enough. Because once something becomes that clear, you don't need to keep observing it. You already understand it. And once you understand it, there's only one thing left. What you're going to do about it. By the time I confronted her, I wasn't unsure anymore. There was nothing left to figure out. No missing pieces. Just clarity. And that made the moment simple. Not easy. Just direct. I didn't plan it. I didn't wait for the perfect time. Because I didn't need one. We were sitting together one evening. Just the two of us. Normal conversation. The kind we always had. And I let it stay like that for a few minutes. Because I wanted to see if anything felt different. It didn't. That was the part that stood out. How normal everything still felt. Even after everything I knew. Then there was a pause. And that's when I said it. You sent me a video. Simple. Calm. No emotion attached to it. She looked at me immediately. Not confused. Not surprised. Just aware. And that told me everything. Because if it had been nothing, she would have asked what I meant. But she didn't. She just paused. What video? She said it quietly, but not naturally. It sounded placed, like a response, not a reaction. I didn't explain it fully. I just said, the one you deleted. That was the shift. Clear. Unavoidable. And I saw it land. Because her expression changed. Not dramatically. Just slightly. Enough to confirm it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I just asked, why was I not supposed to see it? Silence. Longer this time. And that silence mattered. Because it didn't belong in something simple. She didn't answer right away. And when she did, it wasn't direct. It wasn't a big deal. That was her response. Soft. Minimizing. The same kind of structure I had seen before. But it didn't hold. Because now I understood it. I didn't argue. I just asked again. Then why delete it? That was the moment everything shifted. Because now there was no way to redirect it. No way to simplify it. She looked at me, like she was deciding how much to say. And that hesitation told me everything. Because it meant there was something to decide. Something to manage. Finally, she spoke. Carefully. Said it was just another group chat. Nothing serious. Just different conversations. And that confirmed it. Not just the existence, but the intention. I didn't react emotionally. I just said, I've been watching how things happen. That was the shift. Because now it wasn't just about the video. It was about everything. The timing, the gaps, the patterns, and I saw it register. Because she knew I wasn't guessing. I said it clearly. There's a space where you all talk before anything reaches me. No accusation, just fact. And she didn't deny it. Not directly. She just didn't correct it. And that silence confirmed everything. Because if it wasn't true, she would have said so. Asked one more thing. Why am I not in it? And that was the only question that mattered. She didn't answer immediately. And that pause was different. Not hesitation. Just acceptance. Like there wasn't a version of it she could adjust anymore. When she spoke, it was quiet. Said it wasn't meant to be against me. That it was just easier sometimes. That conversations were simpler. Less complicated. And that was it. No detailed explanation. No attempt to justify it fully. Just that. And I understood what that meant. Not in the words. In what they implied. That there was a version of me that didn't fit into how they wanted to speak freely. And that was enough. I didn't argue. I didn't push further. Because I wasn't trying to change it. I was just seeing it. Clearly. For the first time, I looked at her and said one thing. You talk about me there. Not a question. Just stating it. And she didn't answer. She didn't deny it. She just stayed quiet. And that silence said everything. Because people don't stay silent. When something isn't true. I stood up. Calm. Unhurried. And she didn't stop me. Not really. She said something about it not being what I thought. About it being misunderstood. But it didn't matter. Because I wasn't misunderstanding anything anymore. I was seeing it exactly as it was. And that was enough. I walked away from that conversation. Not angry. Not emotional. Just clear. Because once something like that becomes visible, there's nothing left to question. The structure explains itself. And from that point on, there was no version of things where I didn't know. And once that happens, there's only one thing left. What you choose to do next. After that conversation, nothing exploded. There was no big family argument. No dramatic fallout. Just a quiet shift. The kind that doesn't look obvious from the outside, but changes everything underneath. I didn't bring it up again. Not with her. Not with anyone else. Because I didn't need to. The truth had already settled. Completely. And once something is that clear, you don't need to repeat it. You just adjust around it. The next few days felt normal on the surface. Messages in the family chat. Plans. Updates. Everything looked the same. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Because now I knew what I was looking at. Not the full version. Just the version meant for me. And that changed how I saw everything. Every message felt partial. Every conversation felt filtered. Not fake. Just incomplete. That was the difference. I didn't stop responding. I didn't distance myself dramatically. I just changed how I engaged. Less automatic. Less open. More aware. Because now I understood something clearly. I wasn't part of the full conversation. Only the outcome of it. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. My sister didn't bring it up again either. Not directly. She acted the same, spoke the same, maintained the same tone. And that told me something. Because if it had truly been nothing, she would have addressed it, cleared it. But she didn't. She let it sit, just like I did. That silence between us wasn't empty. It was understood. And over time, that understanding turned into distance. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just space. The kind that grows without needing to be explained. I also noticed something else. The patterns didn't stop. The same structure stayed. Conversations ending too quickly. Decisions already made. That separate layer still existed. Nothing changed about it. Except now. I was aware of it. And awareness changes everything. Not the situation itself. Just how you exist inside it. I stopped trying to catch up, stopped trying to understand things that were already decided somewhere else. Because I knew where that part happened, and I knew I wasn't in it. So instead, I focused on what I controlled. My responses, my presence, my involvement. I didn't remove myself completely, but I adjusted how much I gave. Because now it was a choice, not something automatic. Family gatherings felt slightly different after that. Not uncomfortable, just clearer. I saw interactions differently, not as separate moments, but as part of a larger structure, one I wasn't fully inside. And instead of trying to force my way into it, I accepted it, quietly, not as something I agreed with, just as something I understood. That was the shift. Because once you understand something fully, you stop trying to change it. You just decide how close you want to stay to it. My relationship with my sister didn't break, but it changed. There was less openness, less assumption, more awareness. And that made everything more defined, more real, not better, not worse, just accurate. I never asked to be added to that group chat, and she never offered, because we both knew that wasn't the point. The point wasn't access. It was what it represented, and that didn't change just by being included. I think about it sometimes, not emotionally, just clearly. Because that situation showed me something I hadn't understood before. That sometimes people don't exclude you loudly. They just create a space where you don't exist and continue normally inside it. And unless you see it directly, you don't even know it's there. That was the part that stayed with me. Not the video, not the conversation, just the structure. Because once you see that kind of separation, you understand something important. That not every relationship includes you in the same way you include them. And once you understand that, you stop expecting it to. You just adjust. That's what I did. Quietly, without needing to explain it. Because I didn't need anyone else to understand it. I already did. And that was enough. Because in the end, it wasn't about the group chat. It was about what it revealed. And once something reveals itself that clearly, you don't question it. You move forward with it. Differently. That was the shift. And once it happened, everything stayed where it was supposed to be. With me. If you've ever felt like you were part of something but not fully inside it, you probably understand this story more than you think. Sometimes exclusion isn't obvious. It's quiet, structured, and easy to miss until you see it clearly. If this story made you think about something in your own life, let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, there are more waiting for you right here.